everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast on the Her Hoop Stats Podcast Network. I'm Crina Mustafa alongside Calvin Wetzel, and today we're going to get into all things college basketball. We're going to talk about some Thanksgiving tournaments and events. We're going to get into, of course, our performances of the week, and then finally we will finish off with our games to watch. Cal, are you ready?
I'm ready to feast this week, but first I'm ready to feast on hoops on this pod with you.
Oh,
I've been feasting all week on watching hoops, and I'm ready to talk about it now.
you were definitely ready for that. I do want to ask, like, real quick, what was it like watching Harmony Turner in real life? I got to bring that back from last week.
Yeah, I mean, she's a hooper. And honestly, it felt like the team goes as she goes too, and it was really fun watching her. Like you talked about that quote that she had, like when
When
she
I
woke
woke
up,
up this morning.
and
Yeah.
obviously she's got like some personality, a little flair, and when you're rooting for the other team, it's not as cool. But like she hit a three very early on and was like visibly getting pumped up and like had that fire, and it I do like players like that. I don't like when they're beating my team, but it was fun from a basketball perspective. And she like they got out to a big lead because she popped off early, and then Birds kind of started to figure out how to take the ball out of her hand. She only scored, I think it was 2 points in the second and third quarter, clawed back into the game, tied it up, and then she took over down the stretch in the fourth. So it was it was really, if she's on, Harvard's clicking. That's how it goes.
Yeah, and she did pretty active on social media. She did say that she was going to be declaring for the draft. So, lots of stuff there as we continue to keep an eye out on her in Harvard season. But let's get into some of these Thanksgiving tournaments on, I think it's called Feast Week, right? Is that the
Yeah, it's
the,
feast
the
week.
pun
We're
that you were
feasting.
making? So let's kind of go through each one. Some of these tournaments at the time that we're recording have not been wrapped up yet. Some of them have been wrapped up yet. So we're going to just kind of rattle through them all and give some general thoughts on some of these teams. We'll start with the Baha Mar Hoops Pink Flamingo Championship because some of these have such long names that I probably should have rehearsed before I started this episode, but we're just going to roll with it. And LSU defeated NC State, but they also had a very close 1 point margin victory. And I'm going to play to kind of tee things off. I'm going to play the game winner from that. And for those of you who are on audio, you're going to be able to hear the play by play because the wildness and how hectic it was, all of that is going to kind of tee off to the conversations that we're having today. So I'm just going to play this game winner real quick.
Are you running this all the way down if you're LSU?
If I'm LSU, I'm taking the last shot here.
Uh-oh. Pops away from Flauget. Referees say it was not deflected. Saved by Flauget. 4 seconds left. And that swirls in! Kaylin Gilbert with 0.9 seconds left.
So there you go.
Wow.
It's a lot that happened in those final seconds of the game. And then some of these other tournaments, Duke versus Oklahoma are playing as we are recording, and we'll talk about them. UConn versus Ole Miss also will be after we record in the Baha Mar Women's Championship. And Duke versus Oklahoma is the Ball Dogs Classic, which is much easier to say. And then UNC defeated Indiana for Battle for Atlantis. And then for the Emerald Coast Classic, Coast to Coast, Alabama versus the winner of Syracuse and Creighton in the championship there.
That was Creighton last night. I'm sorry, I forgot to
Oh,
update
there
that in
we
the
go.
notes because I put that in the notes before that game happened. But Creighton did win
All
again, so
good.
Alabama versus Creighton. My bad.
There you go. But yeah, let's start with that LSU game winner and then kind of following it up with their win over NC State. I think the conversations that we're going to have around some of the takeaways of these teams is how the committee evaluates them and how they decide seating later on, once we get closer to the tournaments and all of that. How do you kind of evaluate LSU? Because they'll have a 1 point victory over Washington and then handily pretty much beat a team like NC State the next day. So yeah, Cal, curious to get your thoughts on kind of all of that.
They've been very inconsistent, which makes it really hard to evaluate, I think. And I think in past years, we've also had some difficulties evaluating LSU early in seasons just based on the schedule that Kim Mulkey puts together. I think it's no secret that it's usually not a high level schedule. And sometimes they beat whoever team ranked in the 300s by 50 or by 60 or by 70. Like, how do we know? That doesn't really tell us a whole lot until we start to see them against some of these teams. Obviously, this year, like we saw them against NC State, they looked good against this Washington team, who, by the way, barely escaped just a few days before from an 0-6 Cal State Fullerton team. So not a team that you probably want to be going down to the wire with if you're LSU. They had some lapses, and like Murray State is just a week or two ago, LSU got outscored 32-12 in a quarter, still won the game. But even within that game, just all sorts of inconsistencies held Murray State below 10 points in one of those other quarters. Their defense just didn't show up, and then at halftime they figured it out. But this team obviously has a really high ceiling. It's just a matter of like, is that going to show up in any given quarter or any given night? In that Washington game, that was not their ceiling. But I do think that, and that last possession was really interesting because it was like the chaos that this whole week is all about, right, in college basketball. And they were down one, which, by the way, I don't agree with the announcers. When you're down one, shot clock off, like, you just go. If you're tied, you hold for the last shot. But if you're down one, like, you got to get a look however you can get it.
Thank you. Yes, this is like one of my biggest pet peeves in basketball because teams stress me out so bad because you cannot be acting like you're tied or in front when you have the final possession and you are down. The clock is not in your favor no matter what you think. So, no, I totally agree with that.
100%. As soon as I heard that, I was like, I don't know what the logic is there, but you got to make sure you get a shot, and you got to give yourself a chance for an offensive rebound, because your worst case is not overtime. Like, if you're tied, if you don't get a shot off, you're still
You
playing. And when you're down, you got to get a look. But that
Yeah.
scramble mode, that was crazy. They escaped. And to your point about seeding and how committee views stuff, they dodged a bullet, because I think, to me, there is a top 7 kind of tier that maybe could win the national championship. And I think LSU is kind of in the bottom of that tier right now. I do think they are a contender for the national championship, but not if they play the way they have looked in certain moments like that. But to me, that top 7 is probably destined for a 1 or a 2 seed. Maybe one of them slips out to a 3 seed. But again, like the Washington, if you lose to a team like Washington, you have a lot of chances to bolster your resume later on in the season. But that's one that's going to make it tough to stay in that 1-2 range. So they dodged a bullet on that one, just resume wise. And I do think that they will put together a 2 seed resume. But and I know we always talk about stuff so early, like, why are we even thinking about this? But it's these games matter for resumes.
Yeah. Yeah, they absolutely do. The entire year matters. And, looking at this LSU squad, like, obviously you have, your big trio in Anissa Morrow, Michaela Williams, that was freshman fire last year for us and is now in I gotta find a word for sophomore. And then, of course, Flau'jae Johnson. But I think what I'm looking for this team is the bench production that they're going to get. Because, as we know, teams with really good depth go really, really far. So yeah, it is an interesting one to keep an eye on. Looking at some of these other teams and matchups, we are going to talk about Duke a little bit today as well. What are your kind of thoughts on this matchup, and maybe just on their tournament so far?
Yeah, Duke's look great. They're playing as we speak right now against Oklahoma, and they look fantastic. They're all over them, 46-31. Duke at the moment. I was getting ready to praise Oklahoma a little bit, and I still will. You can see it in our notes here, but Oklahoma decided to change my plans a little bit, because their I was going to talk about their defense, and obviously they're on pace to give up 50 to Duke and a half. Their defense hasn't been it today, for sure. And Oklahoma's not a team that's known for defense. Jenny Baranczyk, not really a defensive coach, but I do think, outside of this first half against Duke, that their defense has looked really good this year by their standards. And it's not going to be like one of the top 5 defenses in the country or anything, but for a team that can score the way they do, I kind of think about Iowa and how Iowa's defense was absolutely awful when Caitlin Clark first came into college, her freshman year, sophomore year. And as she went on in college, they never became like a top 5 type defense, but they started rebounding the ball on the defensive end. And if you can hold teams to one shot, you can at least have a respectable enough defense to you're not giving up 200 every night, and your elite level offense can carry you to wins. And I think that's what Oklahoma's been doing at this point too. They lead the country in defensive rebounding by any measure. Obviously, they play a fast pace. Those numbers are going to be inflated in terms of like totals per game, but they lead the country in defensive rebounding rate. Reagan Beers, big part of that, but it's been a group effort. So I do think that they have a respectable, not an elite, but a respectable defense this year, which is enough for a team like that who can fill it up. Not today, again, because Duke looks awesome. I haven't checked the box score how your girl Toby's doing, but I'm sure she's
she only has
hooping.
3 so far, but we'll see. We'll see how it ends.
Yeah. Hopefully, she'll have a lot more by the time we're done with this pod. But I have been impressed
Yeah.
with Oklahoma's defense up till today for sure.
Do you have any other tournament thoughts on kind of these other teams around, I guess, around the world? I don't even know, around North America, around the Caribbean, wherever they are, the places that we did not get sent to, like we asked on the last show. But yeah, any thoughts? I know we aren't really going to talk about UConn too much, but AZ Fudd is back, and which has been great to see. And they're been kind of rolling so far. So yeah, any other thoughts on the rest of the tournaments?
Yeah, UConn plays a little bit later against Ole Miss, so recording this week is tough. Like no matter when you record, you're going to be recording like before, or during,
Yeah.
or like have big games that happen after we record before we're released. So, but in terms of
Mhm.
other thoughts, a defense that hasn't just looked respectable by compared to past year standards, but is just straight up awesome. I think is North Carolina. They went through that entire battle for Atlantis, allowing 127 total points in 3 games, held their last 2 opponents below 40. And I know Indiana's down a little bit this year, obviously lost some pieces, but UNC has been locking people up hard. They basically sailed to the championship to 3 wins pretty easily without even scoring 70, but they didn't really have to sweat anything out in down the stretch in any of those games either. And another team that I've been impressed with that also is playing right now, so I should go check the score because maybe they're down 20 and going to make me look dumb. Is Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's down 2 to Michigan State at halftime. All right, so I'll take that. Vanderbilt has looked good. I do like Michigan State too, but Vanderbilt has looked very, very good this year, I think. And Shea Ralph is really doing something special there. We're going to talk about them and someone on them more in our next segment, but someone I've been very impressed with.
Yeah, we did tease a couple of our teams here going into our performances of the week segment. But these are the Thanksgiving tournaments going on during Feast Week, and that we have been feasting our eyes on as best we can with the channels and outlets that they've been broadcasted on. But anything else you want to kind of touch on before we get to our performances of the week?
I think that's it. Let's talk. Let's talk these 2 players.
All right, let's do it. In case you guys didn't get the hint, we really hinted at these next 2 players. My performance of the week. I know I didn't have a Canadian player last week, but I went back to it. I have a Canadian player this week because, and it's going to be the same reason every week. It's always going to be a player for me that is too hard to ignore, and that is none other than Duke's Toby Fournier. She had a career high 25 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 blocks off the bench versus Belmont in a 79-47 win last week. And she, as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, this is our weekly YouTube plug. She got the USBWA Freshman of the Week. It's her first national honor. Just has been really good to start the season, and especially off the bench, I think is the key thing here. I think if she keeps this up, and keeps playing at this level and keeps being a really important player for this team, she should definitely be in talks for 6th player of the year. And I know, Cal, you wrote here, she's the only bench player in the country averaging 12 points, 4 rebounds, and a block per game, which I think is really, really cool. She is just such a fun player. I think the thing that sticks out the most for me is how sure she is in all the moves that she makes. I think her footwork is one of my favorite things about her game. And she's just so crafty and she can do a lot on the floor. So yeah, I've really, really enjoyed her debut with Duke, and she got her career high already at 25. So that's my performance of the week. That's my player of the week. Yeah, Cal.
Yeah, I gotta stay with the freshman too. I don't know how many freshmen we've done out of our like every performance of the week this year, but I feel like it's like 80% of them because we love
Freshman
the
fire
freshman
is
fire
back
here.
and better than ever.
It's going hard this year. And my freshman is Michaela Blakes from Vandy, who we just got done talking about. Big reason why Vandy has been so good this year. And I think they're a legit top 25 team. She had 23 points, 4 assists, 4 steals against Arizona in a win the other day. I haven't checked her line in the first half today, either of this game. She was 5 for 8 from 3 in that game. Hopefully she's hooping today too. As soon as we get off, I'll probably go watch the fourth quarter of that one. But
She's got 3 points in the first half.
wow, what is the deal with everyone we're talking about? Just Oklahoma's defense, Toby, Michaela. No,
To
no
be
one is showing
fair,
up to play.
it's like pretty spread out for Vandy. Like a lot of players have scored. So I'll say that. I'll
Yeah,
say that.
yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. Because I feel like every single thing. If
Like
we would have recorded this
six
like an
players
hour
have scored
ago,
for Vandy.
every point that we'd be bringing up on this pod would sound a lot better. I think in every segment. But we're gonna go with it
That's
anyway.
okay.
I hopefully Michaela and Toby have big second halves. We'll go with that. By the time you're listening to this, hopefully they both dropped 20. We'll see how it goes. But I have loved Michaela's poise and her fearlessness as a freshman, like down the stretch of that Arizona game. She went off early. It's almost like Harmony Turner, actually, the other day. Went off early, built a big lead. Arizona chipped away, and then it was Michaela Blake's time. Once the game kind of got interesting again, they put the ball in her hands, let her go to work and start making plays. And she basically sealed the deal for them. She can score in a lot of different ways. Obviously, she can shoot. She can get into the paint, and she can really get after you on the defensive end as well. So I've loved what I've seen from her so far. I think big time recruit from Shea Ralph there, who continues to build that program into something really formidable, and she's a big part of that.
Love that. So there you go. There are players of the week, Toby and Michaela over at Duke and Vandy. I like that you said Vandy. I'm gonna start to say Vandy now, because it's way more fun to say than Vanderbilt. So yeah, those are our performances of the week. Let us know who else you guys are enjoying to watch. And without further ado, we're gonna get into our games to watch for this week. And as you guys know, I am now sharing the matchups. We have completely stopped choosing our own, at least for right now, for the time being, because there are a lot of really good ranked matchups and some other non-ranked matchups coming up. So we'll start with the ranked ones, and then for my YouTube people, we got a pretty nice graphic up here, I would say. We've got South Carolina versus Iowa State on Thursday, November 28th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox. South Carolina obviously just lost to UCLA. Big upset. UCLA was ranked number 1 this week. Make sure you listen to the press break on the Her Hoop Stats podcast network where they broke that game down. So they will face Iowa State. Then we have Notre Dame versus TCU on Friday, November 29 at 5 p.m. Eastern on Flow. And Cal has put a crying emoji in our Google Doc.
And I did it. I did the colon thing because you taught me how to do it. So
That's
that was
hilarious. That's amazing. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, make sure you catch our episode from last week where I taught Cal how to put emojis into Google Docs. It's some tantalizing stuff. All right. And
life
then the
changing.
third, yeah, life changing. The third ranked matchup will be Oklahoma versus Louisville on Wednesday, December 4th at 5 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. Let's talk about these 3 matchups first. We'll start with South Carolina and Iowa State. What are you kind of looking for? You know, I kind of teed it up a little bit with they're coming back from their upset against UCLA, and this is kind of their next ranked matchup. But what are you looking for?
Yeah. So first off, I have to get out in front and say that I am definitely not part of this like a weird thing going around online that's like Mylasia Fulwiley should transfer, like Dawn's a bad coach because she like doesn't play or whatever rotation
And
decisions.
Dawn
Like,
responded today. She was like, "We're good. We have a close relationship. It's just
yeah.
other people that feel like this for some reason."
Right. Like anyone who's saying all of that type of stuff like doesn't know this program, obviously. So nothing that I'm about to say has anything to do with that because I fully hardcore disagree with that whole line of thinking that's going around. That being said, I do think this would be a great Malaysia Fulwiley matchup against Iowa State because Iowa State, they struggled to contain Maya McDermott. They struggled to contain Katie Dennebier in their last few games against UNI and Drake and guards who can handle and get into the paint and create for themselves and others. They haven't really shown the ability to guard guards like that. So I think Malaysia Fulwiley could really give him some trouble if she does get minutes in this one. So that's definitely something I'm looking for. But I think both teams are like South Carolina looking to bounce back from UCLA. Iowa State, they escaped against Drake, didn't do so well against UNI, but I think they're kind of looking to right the ship as well. So going to be a fun one. And
I
Fox,
know.
I love games on Fox
I
just
know.
because
I
of
love it too.
the
I can
round ball
access
rock
it
thing.
too.
Yeah, so good.
I can't even believe that I forgot that Iowa State also just had that big upset the other week from UNI. UNI, I don't even know the letters anymore. That sounds so weird. Anyway, next matchup, let's talk Notre Dame versus TCU. Obviously, we just saw TCU last week on that big national TV game. Notre Dame has also been really, really good to start the season. Cal, what are you looking at for this matchup?
These are two teams with the arrow pointing straight up right now. The opposite is the arrow for those last two teams in the last game or two. I'm continuing to watch Olivia Miles, watch her draft stock because I think we've talked about the potential for her to be the number 2 pick. And at the time we talked about, I forget if that was last week or 2 weeks ago, I kind of said I still leaned Kiki, but I think that the decision is going to be a lot tougher. And I'm pretty much flipped to being on team Olivia Miles number 2 at this point. I think she is the correct decision there. And that game against
Sorry, are you saying you're
USC,
going the mile with her?
that is exactly what I'm saying. Yep. Yep. We
I
made
have
it
to get
22
get
minutes.
back on the punch train too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. If you want that breakdown, like you said, go listen to the press breakdown of that Notre Dame USC game. But Olivia Miles looked fantastic as she has all year, and the way she's shooting it now, I think post injury, that was something that teams were able to go under screens on her and things like that before the injury, and that hasn't been the case so far this year. If that continues, that just adds a lot to her draft stock as well.
Yeah, like she just seems very comfortable. Like you can tell this is a player who has been waiting a long time to get back
Yeah,
onto the court. She really missed it. She was really hungry for it. And, she's scoring at an elite level. She's passing at an elite level. And just all around looks like, hey, I belong on a basketball court. And it's really, really cool to see players just be able to do that, especially we know how serious injuries can be and how sucky they can be. Paige Beckers being a good example of that, of someone who is taking as many college years as possible because she wants that time on the court because it was taken away from her. So, yeah, really, really cool to watch Olivia Miles and Notre Dame kind of succeed so far. So that's going to be a good matchup. And then the last ranked matchup, Oklahoma Louisville on December 4th, which we know is a week away, but still another ranked matchup. We talked about Oklahoma a little bit, but what are you looking for in this one, Cal?
well, we talk about Oklahoma's defense, which has been pretty good until the last hour or so, but their offense is always going to be able to get it done. And Jeff Walls, I think, for Louisville has been known to get creative sometimes with his defensive game plans. So I'm interested. Guarding Oklahoma is a lot tougher this year, even than it has been. It's always been tough, but adding Reagan Pierce, that low post kind of new dimension that I don't think they had before. In addition to just the other difficult elements of guarding that system. So very interested to see kind of what Jeff Wallace does on that front to slow them down on that end.
You literally kill me. Every time we've talked about a team that is currently playing as we're recording, it's too funny. It's too funny because it just goes
Because all
against
of them are
exactly
doing
what
like
you've
the
written.
opposite of what we've been talking about.
I wish you guys could see Cal's notes that he so diligently prepared ahead of time and then just look at the live scores of these teams that we're talking about.
Just nothing lines up.
It's like the perfect juxtaposition. It's
This is what I
some
get for
real
preparing ahead, huh?
Some real comedic stuff. I love it. It's very funny. All right, we got a couple of other matchups that aren't ranked, but that do interest us. We got BYU versus Iowa on Friday, November 29 at 9 p.m. Eastern on Flow Sports. We've talked a little bit about BYU this season because Canadian star Delaney Gibb has been balling out for them, and then they're playing Iowa, who has had a pretty good start to the season, if I do say so myself. I know there was a lot of discourse about what they were going to look like following the departure of Caitlin Clark and a couple of their other pieces. But Cal, what have you thought of them so far, and what are you looking forward to for this matchup?
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought Iowa was going to kind of fall apart and fall off the map, and nothing, they did the last several years with Caitlin Clark there was quiet in any way. But I think this year they are quietly having a really impressive start to the season, and like no one's going to mistake them for a Final Four type team that's going to go make their third national championship game in a row. But they're not off the map at all. They are definitely a second weekend caliber team to me. What Lucy Olson has brought to them has been big, and Hannah Stolke's kind of taking that next step. So I still think this is a team that can compete in that next, the LA schools came into the Big Ten and are basically taking over at the top of the Big Ten this year. But outside of those two, I think there's a big kind of tier in the Big Ten that it's anyone's game for who's the third best team in the Big Ten. I don't know if I would put Iowa there right now at number 3 if I were ranking these teams, but I definitely think that they're in that big conversation of teams that can compete with basically anyone outside the LA schools in the Big Ten still.
For sure. And then the other matchup we have is Vandy versus Miami on Wednesday, December 4 at 5 p.m. Eastern on ACC Network. Obviously, we just talked a lot about Vandy. You guys are going to get so sick of me saying that. It sounds way less cool when I say it. I sound so lame. But we just talked a lot about Michaela Blake's and their team. But what are you looking forward to for this matchup?
Yeah, obviously just watching her again, any chance I get to watch her. But I'm also very high on Camille Pierre and what she's brought to this team. And do you have the box score still pulled up, by the way? I know you pulled up that box score of that game. How much
For Vandy?
for Vandy right
It's
now? Yeah, how much?
it's still
What's her line
halftime.
look like? What's her Camille Pierre? What's her line look like right now?
She has 4 points.
Wow. Well, good for Vandy for being right there against Michigan State without getting a lot of offense from those two. Let me
I
pivot
mean, I
and talk
said,
about
it's pretty spread out, Cal. You have to listen. It's pretty spread out, okay?
yeah,
That is
you
the
did tell me
reason.
that, didn't you? Let me pivot
Yeah.
and talk about how deep this team is because obviously they have a lot of depth outside of those two as well. And that did show up in the Arizona game. The broadcasters were talking about it, but I think that's another element that they have. I loved Camille Pierre's game in that one, but clearly they have other options as well. So watch them for everyone. Just watch the entire roster in that one.
Yeah, there you go. Watch the entire roster. Great stuff. I think on Miami side, I'm looking at Nat Marshall. I know she's been a little quiet since she had that career high 24 points a while ago, but she's someone that I actually really love to watch play. And when she's on it, she's a really fun player. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of interested about in this matchup. Any other conflicting box scores you wanna touch on before we wrap things up?
I think I'm good. Anything else I say is gonna end up being incorrect too, so I might quit while I'm ahead.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. All right, those are our games to watch for the week. That's going to do it for today. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to Coast to Coast. Make sure you're following us on social media at Her Hoop Stats. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you're subbed to our YouTube channel so that you can catch our episodes every week. You can follow myself at Crina MM. You can follow Cal at C Wetzel 31, and we will see you next week.